Hiya, my name's David, the Wandering Ponderer. I'm in Vane Lane. I'm on my way to find some of Coggeshall's secret history. A fake history of Coggeshall, which is just as interesting and hopefully entertaining. In there, many years ago, during Victorian times, that was the house of a Victorian scientist. And that place on the top there, they used to conduct experiments. Some say the experiments were for Queen Victoria. And they were to do with the clock tower. The historical town of Coggeshall. Little do people know today that Coggeshall has a secret history. A secret history that back in Victoria's day, even the town folk then were unaware of what was being planned for their town. Queen Victoria's reign started on the 20th of June, 1837. She was crowned a year later on the 28th of June 1838 and finished her reign on the 22nd of January 1901, and by then she was aged 81. In the time of Queen Victoria, there were lots of attempts on her life. There were assassins, there were threats, and anybody that's seen that film with Billy Connolly in it would know that Queen Victoria eventually carried a gun with her. A plan was devised to celebrate the Queen's Jubilee in 1887 that was kept secret. They wanted to do something to celebrate the Queen's Golden Jubilee, but they also wanted to do something to preserve the British Empire. So a plan was devised for a secret weapon, and the town of Coggeshall was chosen to be the testing ground, the proving ground. A house in Church Street of Coggeshall was chosen to be the main centre of this project. The roof of the building proved to be a good observation point to oversee work on the town's clock tower. It was the clock tower that was chosen to be the object of this super weapon. And plans were drawn up to be approved, of course, by the Queen herself. But unbeknown to the Queen, the military were wielding its technological genius with the help of some scientists of the day and very well-known engineers The clock tower was going to be remodeled to become a super weapon. First plan. The plan to use the tower in a Jules Verne fashion. The Queen, being an avid reader of Jules Verne's novels, was well aware of the science behind a missile, a projectile that could reach the moon. But the military wanted to use this idea as a potential weapon against any threats that the British Empire could have. They drew up many plans of how they would convert the clock tower into this super weapon. The first being a missile powered by gunpowder, but the modern explosives of the day would lend themselves to this project very, very well. The Chapel Inn was chosen to store the barrels of powder, but there were concerns. Although the chapel was just a stone's throw away from the site, and the barrels could easily be rolled from one building to another down the alleyway, it was the workers, the people who actually worked at the chapel, that were the biggest threat. If someone were to casually lean on a barrel of explosive, smoking tobacco, as tobacco was quite fashionable in that day, perhaps emptying their clay pipe by banging it on a barrel, seeing as how this was all going to be kept secret. So another plan had to be found. Perhaps a cellar beneath the clock tower to hide the barrels. Although the cellar in the chapel would have been adequate, the workers were not to be trusted. This plan, having been put before Queen Victoria, showed several weaknesses. The missile itself, when projected, would produce flames of fire, and the clock tower, being wooden in structure on the outside, would burn, and it was soon realized that the projectile would explode before it ever reached its target. So a second plan was put into action. The first plan, disapproved by Queen Victoria. She was definitely not amused. The second plan was used more secretively. The clock tower itself would have an open top that would flip open, and inside the tower it would be reinforced with steel, a steel structure, and the best engineers were put on the project. Sworn to secrecy by the military, they began to draw up plans to line the inside of the clock tower with steel, effectively turning the clock tower into a gun, a giant gun, capable of projecting an enormous bullet in true Jules Verne fashion into the air. But this plan, when put before Queen Victoria, was rejected. She was not amused. This was her golden jubilee. This idea of the military for using the Golden Jubilee to bring about destructive weaponry, she said it was fanciful, and she was most definitely not amused. The project was shelved officially, but unofficially, as history outlines, these ideas of such weaponry were kept, and in latter days, the more modern days, some of these ideas have been put to use. The clock tower was given a makeover. In reality, the tower was extended a little bit, and a new clock, a more fitting tribute to Queen Victoria. And she was definitely amused.